Hey everyone, Chris Surdak for another edition of Just for Jerks at Brant Point Lighthouse in Nantucket, Massachusetts. Why am I here? Because I can be. I know, just trying to get away from it all a little bit, and having been here before, it's really great being here in off season because it's totally isolated. There's practically no one here. We got just amazing weather for this weekend, as you can see, and it lets you kind of absorb some of the energy of the place, and particularly of the ocean. And the discussion I want to have today is opportunity cost and risk, which is something that all of you that I deal with on a frequent basis are concerned with. And I chose Nantucket because of the whaling industry that really built up here in the late 1700s, early 1800s, where the way you lit your house was either with an oil lamp or with candles. And if you were wealthy, you had an oil lamp. Where did that oil come from? It came from animal fats mostly. That's really all we had access to at the time. Again, late 1700s to early 1800s. And so here in Nantucket, largely because of the harbor that's in front of me right now, became the center of whaling in the North American continent. People would come here from everywhere. And in fact, there's a very large Portuguese population in Massachusetts and here in Nantucket because sailors came from Portugal to make their fortune here on the island of Nantucket. Interestingly enough, there was a period of time in the early 1800s where the highest concentration of per capita wealth in the world was, the first place was London, second place was here in Nantucket. There were more equivalent millionaires here than anywhere else in the world, save London. And this was sort of the Silicon Valley of its era for the same reasons, for this notion of there's a risk out there worth taking, and if I take the risk, there's a chance that I'm going to succeed and become wealthy. And that wealth came in the form of whales. So guys would sign up for a 2-year tour on a sailing boat. They'd live on a hammock in a disgusting, stinky ship, hunting down these 50 to 100 ton animals with a stick, a sharp stick, literally, a harpoon. And you would wound the animal and have it drag you on what they called a Nantucket sleigh ride, as the animal basically bled to death from the wound. And then you would catch it, cut it up, cook it, get the oil out of it, and then come back the equivalent of a multimillionaire if you survived. So that took place, again, through the late 1700s to about mid-1800s. And if you were one of the people that both went and were successful at it, you came back and you struck it rich, and you would be a wealthy entrepreneur. So we've seen this before, and the interesting example here is it was the people that took that risk early that achieved the greatest results. Why? Because there were more whales. I mean, eventually the whales were hunted out to a great extent, so it became harder and harder to find them. And it became more expensive to get them, and more people were doing it. So you were of a larger population of all going after a diminishing resource. Does this sound familiar? It really should, because this happens with any innovation. If you go to my book, Jerk, I have the whole chapter on making investments and the die process. Discover, infiltrate, and then exploit. And so this was a resource. Whales that we discovered were valuable to us for their oil. We infiltrated the market, we built more whaling ships, we hunted more of the animals, and we exploited it to the point where it was very difficult to get whales. There too, what happened in the mid-1800s is we discovered this little thing called petroleum, oil, and more specifically kerosene. And kerosene was cleaner burning as a fuel for oil lamps. It was better, you could get better lubricants for machines because they also use whale oils for lubricating machinery, early machinery. And just generally speaking, it was a lot safer and less risky to go after. So inevitably, that market for whale oil completely collapsed. And by around the Civil War time of the American Civil War, the mid-1800s, the entire market for this collapsed. It was a 1 century really boom for this particular product in this market. People that got in early took the most risk early on, profited massively. People that were late entrants really had the struggle to make any money, and at the end the market was taken away from them by a better, cheaper, newer technology and innovation. Again, this should sound pretty familiar to all of us. The hit to this space was so drastic, and this might be a warning shot for Silicon Valley. The hit was so drastic that the island was nearly abandoned by the late 1800s. So it went from being the second per capita most wealthy place on the planet to nearly completely abandoned. And it wasn't until the mid 1900s, so I guess a little bit after World War II, that developers came back to the abandoned islands, started buying it up, recognizing it would be a hot spot for wealthy people from the Northeast. And lo and behold, that's what you have now. I mean, a starter home on this island is $3, $4, $5, $6 million, easy. But the real story there is this notion of risk-taking, right? We're constantly being shown new ways of doing things, new market opportunities. It's the early entrants, the people that are taking the greatest risk, that stand to lose the most, granted, but they also stand to gain the most. And those early entrants, when they get it, they will be successful. They'll make money if they're the Steve Jobs of their industry and their era. And those that are kind of waiting behind the scenes and they take longer to get engaged, the opportunity is going to get less and less. And in fact, the probability of failure is going to get greater. That's just the nature of markets. And it was true here, it's true today. If you're trying to get into cryptocurrency or anything like that, blockchain, these newer technologies, it's the same thing. The early entrants are the ones that take the most risk, but they stand to gain the most as well. And this also brings the discussion of risk aversion, which you see everywhere in more traditional businesses. That fear of loss leads us to a very risk-averse approach to our strategies and our tactics. And the problem with that is you can't save your way, you can't risk avoid your way to greatness. I can prevent myself from losing what I have through risk avoidance, but I'm not going to gain from it. Even in the capitalist society with positive interest rates, you're going to make a little bit more, but you're barely keeping up with inflation. So many organizations that are heavily focused on averting risk or avoiding risk, really all they're doing is they're just delaying their eventual doom as the markets naturally change and evolve as they always do. So, kudos to the risk takers. If you're out there, you're looking to try to figure out what is the next whaling industry, what is the next blockchain or Bitcoin, it's out there. You just have to find it, and you have to be willing to take the risk to jump in early. And look forward to your own Nantucket sleigh ride. It's going to be a wild one, whatever it is you do, if you do it right and if you do it early enough. And the chances of having the big reward is greater than if you just kind of wait and see what happens when other players move before you. So that's it for this week's edition from Nantucket. I have no idea where I'm going to do the next on location thing, but hopefully it'll be something interesting too. Check out the history of both the whaling industry, this island. There's a lot to be learned there. Moby Dick, Herman Melville, his whole book was based upon the stories of people living here and making these kind of risks. You can go out and find your own Moby Dick and kill him, or he'll kill you. You'll see. But again, that story of taking risk and what the potential advantages and disadvantages are deeply wedded to that book, so check it out. Hit the like button, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.